been introduced to this time frame here. We're going to the days of King Ahab. All right, so we're just over at Megiddo. Time of Solomon. What's our dates for Solomon? Around 950 BC. Okay, we're now 100 years into the future from Solomon, around 870 to 850 BC. Remember what happened after Solomon's reign? We had a unified kingdom and then it split. Rehoboam, Jeroboam. We talked about Jeroboam and how bad Jeroboam was. So go to 1 Kings. I think Dan, you read this, right? The evaluation of Ahab.
Yeah.
We read this.
Yeah.
So 1 Kings 16, verse 29 and 30. I'll read verse 30 here. Ahab, son of Omri, did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. He not only considered it trivial to commit the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, but he also married Jezebel, daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and began to serve Baal and worship him. He set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal that he built in Samaria. All right, what do you remember about Baal? We call her Baal, and a lot of times we use the word Baal. What have we learned about Baal so far?
The god of water.
Offers sacrifices. Canaanite god. Brought water. Sometimes fertility god. So Baal and Asherah are both going to show up here. Okay, you actually see this in verse 33. Ahab also made an Asherah. Ahab also made an Asherah pole and did more to arouse the anger of the Lord, the God of Israel, than did all the kings of Israel before him. This is, like Megiddo, a terrible time and a terrible place in Israel's history. So now chapter 17, skip down. Here's where kind of the Elijah cycle starts. Now Elijah the Tishbite from Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, who's Ahab? He's the king. He's the king of the northern kingdom, the king of Israel. Said to him, as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years, except at my word. What does that take for someone to go to the king and tell them that in this land, in this place? You're probably risking death, right? That's some chutzpah right there, right? This is Elijah trusting the Lord and doing something that demands a lot, and trusting that when God says it's not going to rain for 3 years or a few years, it says here that it's not going to rain. Okay, so we're gonna fast forward now to chapter 18, verse 1. This is where we're starting to move to this location. Okay, chapter 18, verse 1. After a long time, in the 3rd year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Go and present yourself, really again, to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land. So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab. Now we've got a problem here, right? Because if Yahweh sends Elijah to go say there's going to be rain, what's going to happen? What are the people there going to think if it actually starts raining? Who do they think is going to bring them the rain?
Baal.
They think Baal. They think Baal is going to come back out of, we saw that, the netherworld, the gates of the netherworld, this cycle of Baal and the other fertility gods. They would die after the rainy season, and they would come back and rise, and rain would come again. So if Elijah stays off in his corner, if he stays over in the southern kingdom, if he does his own thing in his own little prayer room, and God answers his prayer, people are still going to equate the coming of rain with Baal. So something has to be done to clearly demonstrate that rain does not come from Baal. Rain comes from Yahweh, the God of Elijah. So Elijah is told by the Lord to go present himself to Ahab because Yahweh is going to send rain. The famine was very severe in Samaria. Ahab had summoned Obadiah. This is not Obadiah the prophet. He's much later. This is Obadiah, the palace administrator. He was a devout believer in the Lord. And here we find out a little bit more about Jezebel. What has she been doing this whole time? Killing Yahweh's prophets. So she's established the worship, the cult of Baal, and killed off many of the prophets of Yahweh. Obadiah, the chief administrator of Ahab, is secretly hiding some of these prophets. And he'll actually tell this to Elijah when they encounter each other, because Elijah, this is kind of fast forwarding from these verses here through the next several verses. Elijah encounters Obadiah. They have some words there because Obadiah is afraid that Elijah is going to go send him, Obadiah, to Ahab and say, hey, meet me at this place. And Ahab's going to show up, Elijah's not going to be there, and Ahab is going to kill Obadiah. So Elijah assures him, nope, I'm actually going to be there. I'm actually going to show up on as I promised. And so now jump down, so that's in verse 15. Elijah said, as the Lord Almighty lives, whom I serve, I will surely present myself to Ahab this day. And so now the encounter begins. Verse 16. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him and Ahab to meet Elijah. When he, this is Ahab now, saw Elijah, he said to him, is that you, you troubler of Israel? Why does he call him a troubler? What trouble has Elijah caused? The drought, right? This is interesting that King Ahab is actually acknowledging that Elijah the prophet is the one who has caused the trouble by not allowing it to rain. So for 3 years, what Elijah said back in 17, that there's going to be no rain unless I say so, has been coming true this whole time. And so verse 18 then, Elijah responds, I'm not made trouble for Israel. You are the troubler. You and your father's family. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and followed the Baals. Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me where? Here. On Mount Carmel. I can't even see through there. Where are we?
Yeah.
I can't see through the trees and stuff to identify the mountains there.
Jezreel Valley is out that way.
Jezreel Valley is that way, so Samaria is then right over there.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, Mediterranean is that way. So Samaria is where the palace, the king, where King Ahab and Jezebel would be. That's quite a ways away. And they're saying, this is the place that we're going to meet. Why do you think they might have come here to Mount Carmel? Why make this the meeting place? There's a few cues in the text a little bit later, but there also might be some ways that we think, oh, why a mountain? Why Mount Carmel?
Could they have had an altar on the mountain?
They would have had an altar. An altar to who? Well, probably an altar to Baal. We also see a little bit later, there was an altar to Yahweh here at one point. So there is this this is a place that often there is going to be a sacred site, a cultic site, a worship site. All right, so this is why he says, let's go to Mount Carmel and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, so it's not just the prophets, it's not just the prophets of Baal and the prophets of Asherah, but people are gathered there. And we know that they're not at the top of the mountain because later it says Elijah will go up to the top of the mountain. They're probably more around the base of the mountain wherever this altar would be. Plus, the top of the mountain would probably have been considered a sacred place that people couldn't go, whether that was for Yahweh or whether that was for Baal. So, they've all assembled here, and here's the beginning of this sermon by Elijah. Verse 21. How long will you waver between two opinions? Anyone have a different translation
Falter.
Falter.
Limping.
Limping. How long will you limp? How long will you falter? How long will you bounce along? Bounce back and forth. This is a really interesting word. It's the same word as Passover. How long will you pass over between Yahweh and Baal? How long are you going to skip, faltering skip between Yahweh and Baal? It also is interesting because later, if you know this story, the prophets of Baal are doing all kinds of crazy things. We'll get there in a moment here. One of the things they're doing is kaskaing. That's my transliterated verb or participle for the verb here in Hebrew. They're limping, faltering. The NIV often has jumping or leaping. But so I think what Elijah's doing here is this play on words. How long are you going to do this faltering jumping for Baal and going back and forth, or choosing really to try to serve both of them? This is syncretism. We've seen this. We've talked about this in many places. It's not just Baal, it's Yahweh and Baal. Although Jezebel is certainly trying to get rid of the Yahweh part and killing off the prophets and only focusing on Baal. So Elijah says, how long will you limp between these? How long will you falter between these two views? If the Lord is God, if Yahweh is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. Can you have them both?
No.
You can't have them both. That's what Elijah's saying here. It's Yahweh or it's Baal. You have to decide which one's it going to be. And how are you going to decide? Well, let's have a little contest here. Let's put these gods, so-called gods, to the test. And right before 22, how did the people respond to Elijah's opening statement of his sermon here? Nothing. This is also going to get echoed. The people say nothing. Baal is also going to say nothing. The people just, we're not going to respond. We're not going to choose between Yahweh and Baal. We're just going to sit here and do nothing. Let Jezebel, let somebody else do this religion stuff for us. Let the prophets do this stuff for us. Somebody else can go do that. We're just going to sit here and see what happens. I don't know that I even need to make this application connection to that statement. So then Elijah, verse 22, says to them, I'm the only one of the Lord's prophets left. He's at least saying, I'm the only one that's standing up publicly for Yahweh. He knows because Obadiah told him that there's 100 others hidden in caves that Obadiah is taking care of. But they're hiding. They're in caves. Elijah is the one who is coming forward, stepping out when other people are not necessarily willing or scared to do so. But Baal has 450 prophets. Now, here's when the contest starts out. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of Yahweh, the God who answers by fire. He is the God. Why do you think he's choosing this as the means to do the contest?
Because it's the opposite of what Baal would bring, right? Water versus fire. No?
Maybe.
Maybe.
He does bring water, but what also comes with rain? Thunder and lightning. So lightning, this is really what he's saying. If your God is actually the God of the storm, is the God that brings rain, and the God that brings lightning, your God should be able to light this thing on fire. He's actually setting up, their sacrifices, as we saw over there in Megiddo, their sacrifices would have been burnt offerings. Now, if they didn't, in their regular practice, they wouldn't have waited to see if the god, Baal or whoever was going to light it on fire. They would light the fire themselves, right? But Elijah is saying there's something that's going to happen here where it's going to be crystal clear that Baal is not real, that Yahweh is the true living God. And so he sets up this contest as a means of saying, you guys are on home field. We'll give you home field advantage. We'll set up the sacrificial system. We'll do it your way. We'll go into your house. We'll go to your place. The whole thing can be yours. We'll do everything to set up so that we're basically handing you the victory if your God is real. And the people said, hey, this is a great idea. What you say is good. We like this plan. This is going to be cool. Fire from heaven. Verse 25 then. Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire. So they took the bull given to them and prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning until noon. This is not a short day. This is not a short, the text reads quickly, it's fast-paced and everything, but this is a long period of time. And they are calling on Baal. How long have they been calling on Baal? Not just 3 hours.
3 years.
Well, potentially their whole life, but especially now, at this stage. How long have they been calling on Baal to give them rain?
3 years.
3 years. 3 years they've been calling on Baal. So there's 3 hours. Okay, come on, Baal. You can do it. Show up. Give us the rain. They called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. Baal, answer us, they shouted. But there was no response. No one answered. This is going to show up again in a little bit here. Why is no one answering? No one's home because he doesn't exist. And they danced around the altar they had made. So they're starting to do, or they've already probably been doing, their actual ritual action there of how they would worship Baal. And who knows what all, as we've heard, was involved in that dancing. The St. Baptist dancing. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. This is why this is one of my favorite passages. It gives us biblical permission to trash talk. We've already talked about some trash talking to David and Goliath. Shout louder, he said. Surely he's a god. You all think he's a god? Come on. Maybe he can't hear you. Perhaps he is deep in thought. He's contemplating, and he needs to be shook out of his thought. Or the NIV has busy. Who else has a different translation? This is a fun one. He's actually taking care of his business. Maybe he's busy. Anyone have an ESV?
Relieving himself.
Relieving himself.
Sleeping.
He's deep in thought, taking care of his business. Maybe he's on the toilet. That's what Elijah is saying to him. Your God, who's supposed to be bringing rain and lightning, he's probably sitting on the toilet. Or he's traveling. He's gone away. Maybe he's sleeping and needs to be awakened. And the irony, of course, is that this is actually some of what the people following Baal would have believed about their God. He was much more human-like and did do those kinds of things and traveled away. Once the rainy season ended, he would travel away. He would die. And then he would be awakened and come back. And so Elijah's saying, maybe you're there. Maybe that's what it happens. So, verse 28 is actually a response to what Elijah said might be the case for Baal. It's not that this is a crazy thing that they're doing. Elijah said maybe he still is dead and needs to come back and be awakened or roused out of his sleep. So what needs to happen in order for his death to be done, his death period to be done? The mourning period has to be done. M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G. The mourning period has to be done. And so they actually enter into their death ritual. So it says here, they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, or some translations have, according to their ritual practice. As this was what they did until their blood flowed, or it really is, their bodies were covered with flowing blood. entering into this bloody, gruesome mourning death ritual, trying to get Baal to come back from his death, from his being away. Verse 29. Midday passed and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time of the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. Baal's not listening. Why is Baal not listening?
It doesn't exist.
Because he can't hear, because he doesn't exist. Then Elijah said to all the people, come here to me. They came to him, and here we go. He repaired the altar of Yahweh. Put 12 stones there representing the 12 tribes. He built an altar in the name of Yahweh. Restores that. He wants to do this right. Although there's obviously problems with an altar being there. But he wants to have this be something that honors Yahweh. And then in verse 32, he dug a trench around it, large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. So a trench that is wide enough and a little bit deep that it would catch any runoff of water, which is kind of a weird thing to do when you've had a drought for 3.5 years. Okay, with the stones, he built this altar, verse 33, he arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, laid it on the wood, doing the same stuff that the prophets of Baal did. Then he said to them, fill 4 large jars of
Water.
water? I mean, yeah, so the Mediterranean Sea down over there, maybe they went down to Jezreel Valley. What are they really deficient of at this point?
Water.
Water. So the most significant resource, we've talked about this a lot, the most significant resource of life, and for 3 years, they've been scrimping and saving. And an earlier one, it talks about how they're looking for any little bit of grass where their mules and their horses can go eat because they're all dying, or they might just have to kill their horses and eat their horses. There's so little of this. And Elijah says, go fill these jars with water, and I'm going to pour it on the offering and on the wood. So if you thought what the prophet of Baal was doing was crazy, this is actually pretty insane. Now, it might have been getting water that was undrinkable, but still, water is replenished, and this is not a big resource. How long do you think it might have taken? I don't actually know the answer to this question, but now that I'm here, it makes me think, how long do you think it would take to go wherever you're going to go find this water and fill 4 large jars and bring them back up? Probably not that long. I mean, it depends on how far away it is, but this again isn't immediately we'll just go to the gift shop and fill it up at the water station, right? They actually have to go down, fill up these 4 large jars. And then, verse 34, do it again.
Times 2.
And they did it again. Do it a 3rd time, he ordered, and they did it a 3rd time. The water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. Why is he doing this?
To show them it just doesn't matter. God can burn up anything no matter how wet it is.
No matter how wet it is. And God can replenish the resources that he also withheld. I mean, this is the demonstration that it's not Baal that's giving you water. It's Yahweh. And it's Yahweh who's going to show his power with fire as well. All right, verse 36. At the time of the sacrifice, so a scheduled, regular, routine time. So however long it took to do this, the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, that I am your servant. And then here we're finally cued in about the plan for this. And I have done all these things at your command. This wasn't just something Elijah concocted in his mind of all right, how am I going to do this? The Lord actually told him, here's how you're going to do this. He commanded him to do all this stuff. Maybe he commanded him on the taunting. I like to think he commanded him on the taunting. He says he did all these things according to the command of the Lord. Verse 37 then. Answer me, Lord, so that the people will know that you, Yahweh, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. And then, verse 38, the fire of the Lord fell and burned up. Now follow this. The sacrifice, that would have been enough, right? That was proven. I mean, the fire shows up at all, and that's proven that Yahweh, I mean, and it's like immediate. He doesn't have to do any dancing. He doesn't have to do any slashing. He doesn't have to do any jumping around. He prays, God answers. The fire of the Lord fell, burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the dirt, and also licked up all the water in the trench. Just obliterated everything. Power of the Lord. Then Elijah commanded them, or when all the people saw this, verse 39, they fell prostrate and cried, Yahweh, He is God. Yahweh, He is God. Then Elijah commanded them, seize the prophets of Baal, don't let anyone get away. They seized them, and Elijah had them brought down to the Kishon Valley and slaughtered there. And I think that's what this statue behind us is representing here. The story's not over yet, although I'm only going to do a couple more minutes. So now, if you remember this part, Elijah immediately tells Ahab, I hear the storm coming. The rain's coming. And get in your chariot and head back. And then Elijah actually goes in front of him and gets there before King Ahab does. Elijah goes up on the top of the mountain, goes up the top of Mount Carmel, and is waiting to see a cloud. And the phrase there on the back of the statue is that verse that says he saw a cloud the size of a human hand. He holds his hand up. The servant sees it. After 7 times, Elijah says to his servant, do you see a cloud? No, don't see a cloud. Do you see a cloud? No, don't see a cloud. Do you see a cloud? And then the 7th time, yeah, I see a cloud. It's the size of a human hand. And Elijah knows at that point, the rain is coming. So the rain comes, it starts, all that stuff. I want to get into 19 because I think 18 and 19 fit together and are very fitting for us on our trip here. So chapter 19, verse 1. Now Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, may the gods deal with me. So she's calling a curse down upon herself. Be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of those prophets. So Queen Jezebel now wants to kill Elijah. And Elijah, verse 3, was afraid and ran for his life. Where did he run to?
Beersheba.
Beersheba in Judah. Are we close to Beersheba right now? No. That is the southern end of Judah. Right? That way south? I think so. So he runs to Beersheba, where he is there with his servant. He went a day's journey into the wilderness, came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he would die. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. Then he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. This is crazy, right? Like, he just saw Yahweh consume the sacrifices, show his power in the fire, and what's Elijah feeling right now at this point in the story? He's afraid, he's depressed, he's exhausted. Real life has now hit him. He's come down off the mountaintop experience, and a queen who wants to kill him is chasing him down. And he says, praise to the Lord. I'm ready for this to be over. I'm done. I can't do it anymore. And God, in his grace and his mercy and his provision, does it again. And he has an angel come and give him a jar of water and baked bread right by his head when he wakes up. Can you imagine that? We were out in the desert, like, just appearing out of nowhere. There's a jar of water and already baked bread. And then he goes back to sleep again and has another awesome nap. I'm sure my Fitbit gives me scores on the kind of sleep I get every night. He was probably getting 99s on that. Angel of the Lord comes back a second time. And then Elijah goes to to Mount Horeb. Do you know where Mount Horeb is? It's also called Mount Sinai. Where's that at? In Egypt, right? So he goes from here all the way down to Beersheba, and then 40 days to Mount Horeb. And it's at Mount Horeb, at a different mountain. So at this mountain, he experiences the presence of the Lord coming down in fire. And at that mountain, down in Egypt, after he's done, he feels all alone. He feels like he's spent, he's given everything he has. He's experienced all this stuff, and there's no one else like him that's been willing to stand up and speak on behalf of the Lord. He feels like he's all alone. And God, in his grace and mercy, says to Elijah, come up on this mountain. I'm going to show you my presence again. So this is now 19 middle of verse 9. The word of the Lord came to him. Elijah doesn't ask, who are you? Because he already knows. Who are you? And what are you doing? Dan might have gotten this question from somewhere. Who are you? And what are you doing here? And Elijah replies with this, I've done all this stuff for you. I've torn down the altars. I've put the prophets to death. All of that. Verse 11, the Lord said, go stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. And I'm envisioning as this happens that he's on one side of a mountain on Mount Horeb, and he's seeing this somewhere else. That the wind isn't like shaking that mountain, but maybe it is. After that, verse 12, an earthquake came, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, and this again on different translations, the NIV has, came a gentle whisper. You have a different one?
Low whisper.
Small voice.
Low whisper.
A low whisper. A small, thin, faint sound. After all the chaos, after all the destruction, the wind, the earthquake, all that stuff, it is in the silence that God makes his presence known. And this is why I wanted to make sure we get to this point. Because I think a lot of times, I'm sure in my own life, we have these, for us, these are literal mountaintop experiences. And we're at a high, and this is awesome. And then we return back, and it can sometimes hit you. Maybe not right away. We probably don't have a queen that's going to meet us in the Kuiper College parking lot that wants to kill us. But it can hit you that you feel this like, I don't feel the same way I did when I was up on the mountain. I don't feel the same way I did when I was in Israel. I don't feel the same way I did when I was battling against the Baals. And God shows his presence. This time not in the fire, but in the silence. Elijah has gotten away from all of that chaos and finds himself in the presence of God. God shows himself in the silence. And God again asks, this is middle of verse 13, the voice said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? And Elijah gives the same answer. I try to give very good theological answers when people ask me, what are you doing here? Elijah's kind of whining at this point. I've done all this stuff for you. And verse 15, the Lord said to him, go back the way you came, go to Damascus. When you get there, anoint these kings, anoint Elisha as your successor prophet. And guess what, Elijah? You're not alone. Verse 18, I reserved 7,000 in Israel who have not bowed the knee to Baal. I mean, it's not hard for us to see that we're not alone in people who care about this stuff. There's lots of people interested in the Bible, but sometimes it feels like when we're out there, we're like Elijah, and God is saying, no, there's many more. And you're going to find them, you're going to connect with them. There's 7,000 who have not kneeled to Baal, whose mouths have not kissed him. And so my encouragement, I'm probably out of time, probably over time, to us all is that especially days, weeks, months after we've returned, that we seek the presence of Yahweh in that still small voice. not forgetting the mountaintop experiences. I'm sure Elijah had great memories of that. But seeking him in that still, small voice. And in that community of the 7,000 who have not yielded their knees to Baal. They're out there. And let us be those who also do not bow the knee to whatever the Baals are. All right. Plan now.
There's if you go inside just to the left there, inside that little gift shop, there's a stairway that takes you up on the roof, which gives you a very good view of the Jezreel Valley. So you can kind of do that, take a look at that and see what's going on. And then let's just wander around for about